Welcome everyone to the MU Extension Forage Livestock Town Hall meeting. My name is Eric Bailey. I am a state's beef nutrition specialist with MU Extension. I will be both the educational topic presenter today and the host for this meeting. My co-host is Wesley Tucker. So what we're going to do today is we're going to start off with a weather report from Dr. Pat Guinan. Then we're going to dive into our topic of the day, which is considerations when weaning fall-born calves. And we're going to talk more along the lines of aligning your weaning date with your spring flush of growth and, potentially the timing of weaning, whether they should be weaned, what date they should be weaned, all of those factors. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. With that, Dr. Guinan, are you on and ready?
I am, Eric. Thank you. And good afternoon, everyone. I'll go right into my presentation. We've had quite a bit of a pattern change over the past couple of days from what was a very mild April, first week or so, and dry, to one that's really shifted to below normal temperatures and some notable precipitation across the state. We actually we're getting a little bit drier. We hadn't seen rain in 10 to 12 days, but things have really changed notably over the past 48 hours. And on the left are actual rain gauge reports for the 24-hour period ending this morning. And you can see some of those orange colors, reds, and those yellows are some of the highest totals with rain gauge reports we saw from the COCORAS network this morning. We have about 300 observations that were reported this morning, and many areas, especially across mid-Missouri into northeastern parts of the state, saw more than an inch of rain. And the bottom left is the table showing some of the highest reports out of Marion County in northeast Missouri. Right here in Boone County, that was my rain gauge report. I had 2.35 inches. We had some big rains yesterday here in Columbia. Wayne County in southeast Missouri, and then over a little bit in west central, in Morgan and Benton County, and down in southeast Missouri again in Carter County. We saw some big totals. And on the right, just is the radar estimate to kind of show what are the estimates, and you can match those up with some of the actual rain gauge reports. And it did a pretty good job in showing where the rain fell over the past 24 hours. Again, those greens and yellows are the heaviest precip. I will note that there was some precipitation prior to the previous 24 hours that impacted some of western and west central and northwest Missouri. So overall, the heaviest totals, most of the state, with the exception of far southwest Missouri, they've actually missed out on these rain events, much lighter amounts than some of those southwestern counties. But overall, the state did see some decent rainfall. The temperatures have responded accordingly, especially during the first week of April. These are soil temperatures at the 2-inch depth. And you can see over the past week, they've been averaging generally in the 50s statewide, low to mid 50s over the northern half of the state, mid to upper 50s over southern parts of Missouri. The map on the right is the latest from about 10 minutes ago. Those are the 2-inch soil temperatures that generally running in the 50s statewide. We have much warmer conditions in southeast Missouri where actually the sun is shining. And so those soil temperatures have reacted. They're now in the lower to middle 60s. It's a roller coaster forecast over the next few days. Of course, today we have an upper level system over north central Missouri that's bringing us this cool, cloudy weather. Showery as well, not nearly the heavy rains we saw yesterday over parts of the state. I think any showers that occur today, maybe perhaps maximum totals might be around 1/4 inch. Nonetheless, somewhat cool and cloudy all day today. But look at that forecast for tomorrow. High temperatures, we're rebounding nicely. Beautiful day tomorrow. Lots of sunshine, highs generally going above normal. Around upper 60s over northern Missouri to low to mid 70s across the rest of the state, even upper 70s in southeast Missouri. So some really nice weather for tomorrow. Things change again. There's another system in the northern plains that will be dropping south and southeastward into Missouri. by late in the day on Friday night and Saturday. And you can see those right in that middle image shows the high temperatures for Saturday struggling to get out of the 50s over much of the state. So again, below normal temperatures for Saturday with cool, cloudy conditions and pretty good chances of showers statewide. I don't think it's going to be of the totals we saw over the past 48 hours, but there could be some areas of a quarter to a half inch of rain on Friday night into much of the day on Saturday. And then we go into Sunday. I guess the pick days of the weeks for nice weather will be Friday and Sunday. And you can see on the far right, those are the high temperatures forecast for Sunday. Again, going back above normal with highs in the upper 60s and lower 70s. So another beautiful weekend day, it looks like to be on Sunday. This is a forecast of precipitation over the next 7 days. Again, I think our best chances will be today. Not a lot is forecast, but we will see some showers. And then again on Friday night into Saturday. And then there is another chance with another system on Monday, perhaps into Tuesday, bringing more showers. When you add all that up, it looks like it could amount up to here in Missouri, anywhere from about a half inch over much of the state to as much as an inch or more over far southeastern parts of Missouri. So there are going to be some other additional chances of rainfall, especially on Saturday, and then perhaps again on Monday and Tuesday. This is the forecast for next week. Again, this pattern change, it looks like from above normal conditions during the first week of April to perhaps by the middle part of April, which will be for next week. Look at all that blue. The deeper the shades of blue, the higher the confidence that this forecast will verify. So they are indicating below normal temperatures are likely across much of the middle part of the country. That includes all of Missouri. Of course, this time of year, average highs are generally in the low to mid 60s with lows in the 40s. So if you look at this forecast of below normal temperatures, that would put highs perhaps only in the 50s for much of next week, and lows getting down into the 30s. On the right, it does look like perhaps drier conditions for next week. Those browns are indicative of below normal precipitation, but green is just to the south with an enhanced likelihood of above normal precip across from New Mexico through the southern parts of southeastern parts of the country. That being said, with these cool conditions, there aren't any indications yet next week for freezing temperatures, but we do have a climatology to show the average dates and when we would see our last spring freeze. And I put the website on the bottom there. You can get a lot more information if you go to that link to get various temperature thresholds and the median dates on when you would anticipate various killing freezes, severe freezes, or light freezes. This is for a 32-degree temperature, so a light freeze. Generally, it's about the third week of April across northern Missouri, around the middle part of April across mid parts of the state. Of course, the Ozark Plateau does have an implication on those later spring freezes, more matching of what we see in northern Missouri. But when you go into southeastern Missouri, we've already approached generally the average date of our last spring frost, and especially down in the Boot Hill. So it'll be something to keep an eye on, though, as we go into next week with those below normal temperatures in the forecast. And Eric, that's pretty much a weather report. Thanks so much for the opportunity, and I'll hand it back over to you.
Pat, thank you, sir. Really appreciate that report as always, and extra appreciate the fact that we're getting some rain here. Certainly helped this spring grass come on. So, okay, we're going to dive into today's educational topic. We're going to talk about weaning fall-born calves. Now, understand that today is not so much going to be about weaning management strategies, but more of a bigger picture of efficient forage utilization for cow herds who are fall calving in general. What I'm going to talk about are going to be cow body condition and the relationship with reproductive performance, why that's so important to the overall success of a beef cow herd. We're going to talk about matching forage demand with forage growth, especially during times of this spring flush of growth that we see here in Missouri on tall fescue pastures. We're going to look at a study that was done at the Forage Systems Research Center in Linnaeus a number of years ago that evaluated the timing of weaning, comparing an April 15th wean date to a July 31st wean date, and then finish up with some of the economics of that decision. What today's overarching theme is really, when should I wean these fall-born calves? So, body condition score and calving interval. This data is widely available. This phenomenon has been demonstrated by a number of labs, but I always like going back to Patsy Houghton's data from 1990. What they showed was that when body condition score differed, so remember, in beef cattle, we measure or evaluate body condition score on a 1 to 9 scale. The number of days after calving that it took a cow to become fertile again, to express estrus again, is what we have on the right side. That period of time when they're not fertile is called the postpartum interval. The thinner the cow is, the longer the postpartum interval is. And in general, data like this are the reason that extension specialists like Dr. Thomas and other reproductive physiologists recommend that a beef cow calve at a minimum body condition score of 5, and ideally a body condition score 6 if possible. Now, if you think about a beef cow, one of our goals for those cows should be to get her to have a calf every 365 days. That is, to stay on a 365-day calving interval. Because they have a 283, 285-day gestation length, we only have about 80 to 85 days after calving to get those cows bred. And each estrus cycle is 21 days long. And so really, if you think about that and put that in the context of these data, we really only have a couple of heat cycles in which the cow might be fertile and able to breed. So we have to maximize the chances we can to get them to breed by keeping them in adequate body condition score at calving. And just to reiterate, body condition score at calving is very important to future reproductive success, and quite honestly to the long-term viability of a cow-calf business. Now, there's a second piece to this puzzle that I think is important to understand in the broader context, and that's the relationship between body condition score and the lactation status of a female. And in general, what is seen in the literature is that body condition score declines in cows as the length of lactation or of suckling is extended. Now, understand, these data are from the Sandhills of Nebraska. And what they did with a rather large cow herd out there is they went in and they weaned a subset of calves every 2 weeks. Starting on August 18th, they weaned a subset of calves every 2 weeks all the way to Thanksgiving. In general, what you see here on the slide is that the cow slipped about a quarter of a body condition score for every 2 weeks that the calf remained on the cow. Now, there's some really important context to this data, and the reason that I'm pointing this out is that in a warm season perennial forage system, when we get into that September, October, November period, we're really on the backside of peak forage quality. So forage quality is declining throughout this time that the graph represents on the screen right here. Meaning that as the cow continues to lactate, the forage quality is declining to a point where it's not meeting her nutrient requirements. And to keep up with the nutrient demands for lactation, she is giving up some body condition score. And that can be a real challenge if you think about a spring calving herd, especially. You'll notice those spring calving cows that body condition score went down to 4 when they were weaned on Thanksgiving. They're going into winter in a very poor body condition score, and there's not really an opportunity or a good time for them to regain some body condition score before they have to calve again, which sets us up kind of in a vicious cycle to possibly extend that postpartum interval. And so thus the timing of weaning is going to influence body condition score in situations where forage quality is declining. But I want to point out a pretty distinct difference between that data set that I show you and what we face when we talk about tall fescue in Missouri. So this slide is courtesy of Craig Roberts, the MU Extension State Agronomy Specialist. And what this shows, I know I've been talking about quality, but this shows the quantity or the yield curve of tall fescue. And what's interesting is that in a fall calving system, we're calving onto that fall regrowth period in tall fescue. Now we have several months of winter to deal with, and certainly from a nutrient requirements and forage quality and quantity standpoint, those don't align all that well. But I'm interested in this concept because if you think about a fall calving herd, you're looking at weaning somewhere in the middle of that flush of spring growth and tall fescue pastures. Now, historically, any excess forage that is grown during that period of time is harvested and stored as hay. But I'm interested in the question, or asking the question of, is there an opportunity to take advantage of this excessive spring growth in the fescue belt by perhaps extending the amount of time that you leave the calf on the cow, by delaying weaning a bit, and quite honestly, rather than using that excess forage growth harvested as dry hay, store it, put it up and feed it the next winter, but harvesting a portion of it while it's still in a lush vegetative state. So what I'm going to show you all now is some data from the Forage Systems Research Center, and some data that my predecessor, Justin Sexton, would have generated. This is an evaluation of weaning management options for fall calving herds in Missouri. And the research question that they asked is, how should fall-born calves be managed in the spring to optimize weight gain and also to optimize forage utilization? So this was a 3-year study that was done up at Linnaeus at the Forage Systems Research Center on a fescue clover mix pasture. Now, the pastures, understand that the pastures were hayed to try and maintain forage quality, or at any time when the forage growth rate outstripped the forage demand by the animals. And I'm going to show you several treatments here in just a second, but the cows were the deciding factor in terms of rotating pastures. The calves were moved when the cows had uniformly grazed each of the pastures or the paddocks that they were using. Now, the researchers split this study into 4 treatments. So a cow-calf pair that the calf was not weaned on April 15th, but instead was weaned on July 31st. The next 2 treatments, the calves were weaned in mid-April, and what they did is they created what's called a leader-follower system. And so basically through their rotations, the calves were rotated onto fresh pastures. Then when the cows were the followers in the group, when they had grazed down a paddock, they were rotated onto the next paddock, and the calves were then moved subsequently as well. And so a very well managed grazing system in which the calves had access to the lush vegetative regrowth. The cows came along behind and basically mowed everything else down. The wean plus feed was the same treatment, except that the calves were fed 3 pounds of a commodity mix daily. And then the 4th treatment, they removed the cows completely from the grazing system, and the calves were weaned in April and grazed on those same managed pastures without cows in the system. And so, you know, I think it's important for y'all to understand that in this case, you know, we had a much lower forage demand from our group of animals that were grazing this pasture, a much greater opportunity for the pastures to get ahead of the grazing animals. So let's look at the cow data. So the cows weighed on April 15th, they weighed 1,270 some odd pounds. Both the cows that had calves remain on them remaining on them, and the cows that had calves weaned off of them. When you look at the weights of these cows on July 31st, though, you'll notice that there was only about a 30-pound difference in the weight between the two groups, and it was not statistically different. And in terms of body condition score on July 31st, the cows that had calves weaned off of them were body condition score 7. The cows that had calves on their side still were at a body condition score of 6.7, which was in excess of our minimum threshold that we recommend for, basically keeping cows in shape for the next breeding or for the next calving season and following breeding season. At least under the conditions of this experiment, my takeaway from looking at this cow data was that, if but we did not incur a nutritional penalty by leaving the calves on the cow for a longer period of time. If we only took 30 pounds of weight off of the cow's back, or 4/10 of a body condition score, at least according to these data, we did not have a detrimental effect on the cow going into the next calving season. And quite honestly, the cows that had calves weaned off of them were as heavy as we want them to be, quite honestly. Okay, let's look at the calf data. So now the calf data has got all 4 treatments together. And just as a reminder, so CC pairs, the calves were not weaned off of the cows until July 31st. The wean and wean plus feed, the calves were weaned April 15th, but then grazed in that leader follower system, where both the calves and the cows were grazed, but in separate units. The stockers were the calves were weaned off of the cows. The cows were taken out of the experiment and were elsewhere and were not a part of the grazing system. So as expected, weaning weight didn't differ in April across the treatments. In fact, we're within just a few pounds of one another. In 2 weeks, there was not much of a difference in terms of weight. But as you'll notice, we get into June and into July, the treatments start to differentiate themselves a fair bit. And you'll notice that on the 1st of June, the cow-calf pairs and the calves that were weaned and supplemented weighed more, approximately 67, 66 pounds more than the calves that were weaned and not provided supplement. And an additional, they would have been about 80 pounds, roughly 80 pounds heavier than the calves that were weaned and cows were removed from the system. And as we go on to July 31st, those differences only amplified from one another, where the cow-calf pairs and the weaned and supplemented weighed more than the calves that were weaned and not supplemented in a well-managed grazing system, or the calves that were left on the field as stockers in a sense. And so from my perspective, there was a real benefit to supplementing calves in this experiment. And to look at it a little differently, there was a real benefit to supplementing them either from the cow or from your bucket. And I think that distinction is important, because we didn't see a detrimental, or they didn't see a detrimental impact on cow condition. And so we were able to supplement using milk very efficiently in this case, and we didn't have to buy any feed. Let's look at the economics though of this setup and talk about what it costs to put weight on that additional 70 pounds of weight on those calves. So if they were feeding 3 pounds a day between the days of April 15th and July 31st, that was 107 days. They fed them 3 pounds a day. That's 321 pounds of feed. Now, I pulled a current feed price for just a simple commodity mix, and that is about 13 cents a pound currently, or $260 a ton. Thus, if they fed them 321 pounds of feed during that period of time, they invested about $41.73 in feed in those calves. Thus, if you express that as a feed cost of gain, or how much it costs to put an additional pound of weight on those calves, 41.73 divided by the 70 additional pounds of gain of the when you compare the leader follower, the wean calves that were getting supplement to those that were not getting supplement, you see that you had about a 60-cent feed cost of gain, which does not include the fuel or the labor that was put into the system. That 60-cent feed cost of gain is in line with backgrounding feed cost of gains that I'm seeing right now. Unfortunately, this dramatic escalation in the price of corn that we've seen over the last 6 months has really impacted the rest of the commodities that we might feed to beef cattle, and feed prices are expensive right now. Now, I want to look at it from we looked at it from a cost of gain perspective, but now I want to look at it from a value of gain perspective, because when we put additional weight on a calf, when we take them from 450 pounds to 550 pounds, we don't often see that the price per pound of the 450 pound animal is the same as the price per pound of the 550 pound animal. That's the classic price slide that we talk about. Now, I borrowed this slide from Wesley Tucker, and I believe that these data represent the value of gain. So factoring in the price slide, this is the value of putting an additional 100 pounds of weight on an animal. These data are from 10 years of sale reports from the Oklahoma City stockyards, I believe. Now, I know it's a busy table. There's a lot to interpret. I want to bring it down and focus on just a couple of numbers here. I want to focus on essentially the value of gain of taking a 450 pound animal to a 650 pound animal, which at least kind of gets us in the ballpark of the weight ranges that we saw in the experiment that I just finished talking about. And so the value of gain of taking a 450 pound animal in April and turning it into a 550 pound animal in June was about $94.95 per hundredweight. The value of gain of taking a 550 pound animal and making it in June and making it a 650 pound animal in August is about $102.85. So thus, if you look at it from a total revenue perspective, we generated about $197 in revenue based on the historical data by putting 200 pounds of weight on those calves between the 15th of April and the 1st of August. And so 197.80 for 200 pounds of weight gain, that's a 99-cent value of gain. Thus, if you were feeding these calves, you spent 60 cents in feed and you got 99 cents in value. So you were ahead by roughly 39 cents, not valuing your labor and your fuel in supplementing those calves. So I just want to wrap this up with a couple of thoughts. I am of the opinion that in this fall calving system on cool season perennial pastures like tall fescue, that cow body condition score should be an important driver of when we should wean calves. Now, I will grant and I completely acknowledge that the data set that were generated from FSRC are important, and I think they're really relevant, but they should be more reflective of an ideal scenario, an ideal set of conditions, good weather, outstanding management, and really good forage base and good cattle. I don't know that we're necessarily going to assume that if we took every fall calving herd in Missouri and we delayed weaning by 65, 70 days, that we're going to see the same outcome. And so in a fall calving herd during the spring flush, if you start to see body conditions slip, I think that's an important idea or driver for you to go ahead and get those calves weaned. But I also think that it's entirely possible that based on our forage type and quality and things of that nature, that there are possibly scenarios where you could leave those calves on the cows longer than what some of us might think and come out successful. And the reason I say that is because they showed very clearly that it was profitable to let the cow supplement those calves and delay weaning rather than your checkbook. Now, understand that was a very well managed forage system that was a very well managed cow system, and there was plentiful forage. And so, that leads me to conclude that, in this specific set of conditions, that's a good opportunity to let your cows supplement your calves rather than your checkbook. So that's all I've got for our educational topic today. Wesley, are there any questions in the chat for me, or does anybody else have any questions?
But yeah, Eric, there was a question that came in earlier, and I just kind of held on to it till you got to the end. So someone asked that when you were showing those body condition scores on those cows, someone asked what was the body condition score of the cows when they started the trial. Do you have any idea?
So the body condition score of the cows when they of the FSRC cows, or that first body condition. I do not believe that I have the body condition score of those cows. Actually, I do here. I've got the data. So between April 15th and July 1st, the cow calf pairs body condition score changed by 0.8 of a body condition score. It increased by 0.8 of a body condition score. The body condition score change of the cows that had calves weaned off of them was 1.1 body condition scores increase. So both groups, irrespective of the weaning date in that FSRC study, gained body condition score, which to me speaks as much to the forage system and to the management as it does anything else.
There was one other question. Someone said that in past they've had other speakers tell them that once a calf gets past 200 days of age, that a cow is essentially a walking pacifier. So does this data indicate the opposite of that then?
So that's a really good question, Wesley, and it's almost somewhat of a philosophical question, because I have long been an advocate of weaning, thinking about weaning rather than weaning later, thinking about weaning earlier in an effort to spare body condition score on a cow. Especially in conditions where body condition score is declining, like we would have shown in that first data set. I don't know that I would personally characterize a cow as a pacifier for a calf, because I speculate that those calves are still going to be drinking milk, but I also have seen enough late weaned systems in my travels that, it would not surprise me if in this experiment, I didn't see the cattle, I wasn't around when this experiment was done, that if it wouldn't surprise me any if a quarter to a third of those calves, the cow had weaned herself already, even in that short period of time. And so I think that's certainly also a piece of this puzzle as well that's worth considering, is that cows will, when you leave calves on them for a long period of time, calves will wean themselves, or cows will wean the calves off of them for you. Take that for what it's worth.
Well, and the final question I have, so I hope participants will submit some. The final question I have is, would you expect to see any change in the subsequent breeding conception rates if the calf was left on for that amount of time and for the following breeding period? So
Wesley, I'm gonna put a square peg in a round hole right here, and I know that that Dr. Thomas is somewhere around, but from my perspective, because those cows' body condition score were near to 7 at the time of weaning in July, unless they had an atrocious August and into September, I would suspect that those cows would have gone into that next calving season in more than adequate body condition score. And I speculate that even if they had slipped some body condition score between then and calving, it wouldn't have been enough to really put a break on the subsequent reproductive performance. But that is a really good question. Now, if the cows are fat, it's one thing. If the cows were, let's say, a body condition score 4.7, 5.7, something along those lines, I would be concerned if I was riding the razor's edge going into the teeth of the summer slump in terms of cow body condition. But in this case, where the cows are almost to a point where, one could label them as nearly excessively fat, I don't believe from a nutritionist perspective that you would have seen subsequent issues with reproduction. And get us wrapped up then for today.
Eric?
I just want, yes.
This Jim, when did these cows calve?
So the cows calved, let me see, I'm looking at the data set right here. The average calving date was late September is how it was described in the data set.
Okay, well, then when you made the comment that they were self-weaning, I mean, I was going, well, I hope so, because they got to be getting close to calving.
Yeah, it's a good thing they weren't August 15th calvers, right?
Yeah.
That's a great question, Jim. I'm glad you brought that up.
So Eric, I think Valerie has unmuted herself, maybe about to say something.
Okay.
I was just going to make the comment that I was working at FSRC at that time, and the cows at that time especially, were pretty high milk producing cows, and so probably better than your average beef cow as far as milk production. So I think that was also maybe a contributing factor to the fact that those calves continue to grow as well as they did when they were nursing cows.
Well, thank you for that insight, Valerie. I suspected that you might have some knowledge of the experiment. Thanks for giving us a little more insight there.
So I do have one more question, Eric. So
okay.
someone has asked, given the forage conditions coming out of this winter that's been kind of a little bit low, if your cows aren't in that type of body condition score now, would you still expect to see them gain as much body condition as these cows did if the cows are a body condition score lower than that?
Okay, so that's a really good question, Wesley. From my perspective, I expect these cows to gain weight between, let's say right now, April 1 and June 1. I expect that the cows are going to flesh up, even if, we came out of that really vicious April polar vortex and, hay feeding season and all of that. The reason that I'm confident that they're gaining weight on it is that I'm very confident in the even, endophile infected Kentucky 31 tall fescue to put weight on calves during the spring flush. I'm doing a lot of work with stocker cattle right now. We're seeing gains in during the spring flush that are much greater than kind of what the classical literature would say. I expect that the cows would gain weight if the cows were let's say the cows are body condition score 4.5 right now. I expect them, even with a calf at their side, to be a body condition score 5.5 by the 1st of June. I think the question will become, and it speaks more to the typical Missouri management, it's pretty common for producers to hold on to fall-born calves on the cows until sometime in mid-May. And I think the more important question is, at that time, what are the condition of the cows? And given that feed is so expensive this year, if you wanted to sell a heavier calf, would you be better off trying to take the risk of, using the cow to supplement the calf rather than, weaning the calf and supplementing it separately?
Someone else just asked, would it be the same for first calf heifers, or would you manage them differently?
That is a wonderful question. This is a scenario where I would be very, very cautious with first calf heifers because, first calf heifer calves at 85 to 90% of mature body weight. She still has to grow. Now, when you get this far into a late weaning system, that first calf heifer should have already settled for next year's calf, but I am very reluctant to put any additional nutritional demands on a female who has not reached mature body weight. I feel pretty good about this data for mature cows, for running age cows that are not that are mature, that aren't gaining, that aren't growing anymore. Young cows, I would be reluctant to do something like this. And I think it's honestly, it sparked a pretty interesting debate between Dr. Thomas and I this morning, and might be an area for future research.
So would there be an advantage for heifer calves that are late weaned if we intend to develop them as replacement heifers?
So that's another excellent question, Wesley, in terms of the potential outcomes. I've seen it speculated in the literature that a late weaned heifer calf has more time to learn how to graze, to develop grazing behaviors. I don't have command of that literature well enough to land on one side or the other, but it's pretty intuitive. I've long been a critic of developing heifers in confinement for that exact reason, because I think the confinement developed heifer lacks some institutional knowledge when she gets turned out to pasture and has to hustle, compared to a heifer that's already developed or has had more time on pasture kind of learning how to graze. And there is some evidence that suggests that they do learn some foraging behaviors from their dams. So I think there's some potential there to keep the heifers on longer.
I believe I'm
Next week, we are going to have a guest speaker from the University of Georgia. Dr. Nick Hill is going to be talking about the importance of endophyte testing Kentucky 31 tall fescue pastures and what the relationship between that endophyte infection rate and animal performance might be when they're grazing these forage systems. After that, we'll be talking about hay on the 22nd, the basics of making hay with Dr. Jimmy Henning from the University of Kentucky. And then, although it might be just a tick late at this point, considering I'm seeing lots of questions on Facebook about fly control, Dr. Craig Payne, MU Extension veterinarian, is going to be talking about fly control, deworming, and vaccination of beef cow herds on April 29th.